President Harris, over and over again, has proven that she's ready to serve as our president and our commander-in-chief on day one.
And that was Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey praising Vice President Kamala Harris as she and Tim Walz kicked off their tour of battleground states in Philadelphia. And Senator Casey joins me now from Pittsburgh to talk more about the presidential race and his own reelection bid. Senator, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. So, as I mentioned, you are in one of the most competitive Senate races in the country right now, one of those who could determine the balance of power in the upper chamber. How does this new ticket change the dynamics of your race?
Well, Caitlin, as you saw yesterday, just great energy in that room. I've rarely, if ever, been at a rally for a national ticket that had that much energy. It kind of reminded me of 2008. But it also gave a candidate like me a chance to lay out the differences between my opponent and me. You know, Dave McCormick and I don't agree on almost anything. And when it comes to basic rights, whether it's women's rights, workers' rights, voting rights, he's on one side, I'm on the other. I want to protect all three. He's been for the abortion bans and the won't support the voting rights legislation and won't support workers' rights by way of legislation. So we were able to lay out those differences, especially when it comes to economic issues.
And I know you were supporting your governor, Josh Shapiro, for the vice presidency, but I'm curious if there's anything that you believe Walz brings to the ticket that Shapiro may not have.
Well, I don't want to compare one to the other. I think either would have been very strong choices. But I think what a lot of voters saw last night, Governor Walz demonstrated that he has a connection to real people's lives. He's been a strong fighter for the middle class. And so I don't think we could go wrong. We had a lot of good choices, but Vice President Harris made that determination. And I know that Governor Walz will be going all across the state. And you saw Governor Shapiro coming out ahead of them and giving them a great lift and a great endorsement. And so he will be working for this whole ticket as aggressively and as in such a determined fashion as anyone. So we're going to have a very strong unified ticket, and it's going to be a very close presidential race in Pennsylvania and a very close Senate race. But I think we'll win both of them, but they'll be very close.
And how much do you think your fate is tied to the top of the ticket here?
Well, look, I think voters have a lot of information about both races and all the candidates, and they'll make individual determinations. But I don't think there's any question, though, that a lot of voters have a strong sense of what is at stake. I just mentioned that my opponent is on the wrong side of workers' rights, women's rights, and voting rights. And I think that's true on a whole range of issues and many different races across the state and across the country. It's never been a clearer choice. Look, my opponent, just like the National Republican ticket, is committed to the billionaire and corporate tax giveaways that they rammed through the Senate in 2017. That'd blow a $4.5 trillion hole in the debt and deficit of this country. I don't think many voters want that. I think voters want a tax cut for the middle class, want to lift up the middle class and support vulnerable Americans like seniors and our children. So I think that the contrast is going to be clear. What I have to do as a candidate is make sure they know those contrasts and make sure that I get as many people to go to bobcasey.com.
And you mentioned your opponent, McCormick. He's been running political ads against you for endorsing, quote, the most liberal nominee ever. I'm curious what your response to that is, particularly after Harris selected someone who is widely considered one of the more progressive governors in the country.
I think Dave McCormick should look at the ticket he's running on. They've got some real problems there. They've got a candidate at the top with a lot of problems, and this vice presidential choice has been, I think, a net negative. So I think that when voters take a look at both sides, they're going to see big differences. But I'll tell you, one of the biggest problems Dave McCormick has right now is people in our state are concerned about those middle-class issues, economic issues, but they're also concerned about fentanyl coming into our country, and they want us to do something about it. I voted for the strongest border security bill in American history, my opponents against it. And now we find out that when he was a hedge fund executive, he invested in the largest producer of fentanyl in China. So I think one of the reasons he's going to be talking about the national ticket is because he's got a lot of questions that have to be answered by him as to why he would invest millions of dollars in the largest producer of fentanyl in China.
And our CBS News polling estimate shows that Harris and Trump are tied in your state. We know Pennsylvania is going to be close. It's been close in the last two elections. What is kind of what's at stake here in terms of Pennsylvania determining this election? Is it a must-win state for Harris?
Oh, I think it's a must-win state for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. It's also a must-win state for me because we can't maintain our Senate majority without winning both races. But as I said, I think both will be very close. The last presidential was a whopping 1.2% for Joe Biden, and so we expect a very close race for both. But I think people know what's at stake. I think it's easily the most important presidential election of any of our lifetimes.
All right, well, we will be staying tuned as we always do, and I'm sure I will be spending a lot of time reporting in Pennsylvania over the coming days, so we will see you out on the campaign trail. Senator Bob Casey, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Caitlin, thank you.